listening to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network, the nonprofit organization that strives to address the staggering disparity in resource availability for individuals suffering from mental health disorders, processing disorders, addictions, trauma healing, and sexual identity challenges. Together, we strive to end the stigma associated with these challenges so that true healing can begin. Welcome back to Coffee and Conversation with Recovery Advocate Network. I'm your host, Ange, and welcome you to episode number 77. So, what do we talk about today? Well, a topic that is very near and dear to my heart, eating disorders. Our guest, Kinsey Dalbec, shared her personal story. At the age of 17, in her senior year of high school, she developed anorexia nervosa. This happened after she and her friends decided to embark on a healthy eating makeover, which is a common teen dieting ritual. Unfortunately, Kenzie was unaware that she was genetically predisposed to developing anorexia. As a result of her dieting, she became very sick very quickly. However, she was fortunate to receive early and aggressive family-based treatment, FBT, which helped her in her recovery journey. Kenzie is now passionate about spreading awareness of her experience and the possibility of achieving full and lasting recovery. Now, what's amazing about this is we are actually doing a 2-part series. This episode will be with Kenzie, and the next episode will be with Kenzie's mother, who identified very early these struggles along with her pediatrician and really had a huge impact on her success and the level of family support she received. Kenzie really emphasizes the hope of full recovery. Okay, I am excited about this episode. Once again, it's one of a 2-part series, so make sure you listen to this one and the one next week where we talk to her mother. And enough of this. It's time for our 3 C's of engagement. That first C, it is the click, the like, love, follow, subscribe, share buttons. You never know who needs to hear this story and whose heart you can give hope to today. And then there's another click. Consider clicking on the link for our website or going to www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org and clicking on the donate button. We talk a lot in this episode about some of the challenges for treatment and insurance, the impact it has on the recovery journey. And you can be a part of someone's journey towards that hope of healing by helping to support future scholarships and bridge grants for those in treatment whose insurance suddenly drops them. So click on that now. The second C, commit. Commit to staying to the full episode and hearing all about her story, her journey, and teasing a little bit about what maybe her mom will talk about next week. And then the third C, what is it? Well, of course, it is your coffee. Oftentimes, I'll give you a hint, I drink Coke in mine. Fill up your coffee, sit back, relax, and let's get started. Okay, listeners, well, welcome to Coffee and Conversation. This is your host, Ange, and I have a very special guest here today. And Kenzie, you don't know this yet about why I'm so excited about this, but I will share it now, and then I'll introduce you. So I have Kinsey Dalbec. Did I say that right?
Yes.
We just practiced it, listeners. Okay, first off, I've had a super bad cold for the past week and a half, so I've had to reschedule several guests. Super excited to have Kinsey here today. But, and so we practiced pronouncing her name because I think names are so important to who a human being is. And every time I mess it up, I'm like, oh, okay. Anyways, I have Kinsey here. Now, the reason I'm so excited is listeners, you've heard much of my story. And after my kidnapping, when I went to one treatment, my second treatment that I went to in this period was 54 days in what I call eating disorder camp. And I've had several individuals that were there with me as well. And I think from my perspective, the perceived stigma and the level of lack of education on this particular challenge is so huge. I've really struggled to find individuals who have been passionate, willing to be so vulnerable to speak up about it. And so I'm super stoked because this week we will have Kenzie, and next week we will have Kenzie's mom share the story from another side of the perspective. So now I'm going to do my classic. I'm going to shut up. And Kenzie, introduce yourself. Tell us why you're here today.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me. My name is Kinsey, like you said. I am 29. I have been in recovery from anorexia for 11 years. It was 11 years in April. So that's super exciting. And I love to share my story. I'm very open. So like you said, it's very like misunderstood, a lot of stereotypes, not a lot of education around it, even in like the professional world. So, whenever I can kind of, share my perspective and my story, I'm super excited to do so. I got sick when I was 17. I was a senior in high school, kind of just started as like healthy eating, lifestyle, makeover, sort of like innocent thing. Sure. I had stopped playing sports, so I had like gained a little bit of weight, probably naturally. Didn't feel super comfortable. So that's kind of how it started, and then lost a little bit of weight. And of course, like that triggered whatever brain genetic stuff was going on and went downhill very quickly. Thankfully, my mom, my dad, and my pediatrician were very receptive, and my doctor actually was pretty educated on the topic. So I got into really great treatment right away. Still wasn't easy, but after a couple rounds of treatment, I kind of fell into what I consider full recovery when I was around like 19, 18, 19-ish. And yeah, like I said, it's been 11 years and it's been so fun. I feel like it's given me a whole new perspective on life, kind of like appreciating everything that I have and everything that I've worked for. So yeah, that's a little bit of my story.
Okay, so I think the start of it at 17, when you and your girlfriends in high school decided to do this healthy eating transition, especially you stopped playing sports. So your metabolism, your use of the fuels and all of that had changed. And so to me at 40, almost 49, I turned 49 in August, that makes complete sense, So can you maybe dig a little deeper into two things? One, what kind of pattern did you and your girlfriend start going down to that? And then secondly, what was that process like that when your pediatrician or your mom or whomever identified there was a challenge and came to you? Because that's an acceptance of that is a really hard thing, right? So can you maybe talk about those two parts of your story?
Yeah. So I kind of had what you would consider orthorexia. So very focused on like quote unquote clean foods, healthy foods. So that's kind of how it started. And then like working out, because eating a little healthier. I don't even remember honestly what that looked like so long ago, but once I started to lose the weight, it like I said, triggered the genetics of anorexia in my brain. So went downhill very quickly. Then I wouldn't eat anything considered like unhealthy. When I started treatment, I was like, I'd rather eat 100 apples than one donut. Like that was my like thought process, I guess, of really, really avoiding anything that was deemed or unhealthy. So like I said, that happened very quickly. I think it was like around 3 months, kind of when it went really downhill, and it was like the restriction went from eating, I guess, a normal amount to like, where obviously I was in a deficit if I had been losing weight, but then very quickly to almost nothing. And it was all like healthy food, fruit, salads, chicken, like that sort of was like the only thing I would eat, very small quantities. And of course with that, I was having some like stomach issues. So I thought maybe I'm lactose intolerant. Like, why does my stomach hurt all the time? Or like when I would work out, I would be in a lot of pain. Obviously because I wasn't eating enough. But that led to a lot of doctor's visits, which is kind of where my pediatrician came in. So we thought it was maybe lactose intolerance or some other like GI issue. And so she noticed, like, obviously they weigh you when you walk in. So she noticed like the very rapid decline. I think it was maybe only like 2 or 3 appointments, but she noticed like I also had a very the clean eating was also paired with an obsession with other people's food and baking a lot. I would bake these like very extravagant like desserts, bring them to school. Like I would never eat any of it. I would have my parents taste tested to see if it tastes okay. I would make them really nice dinners, and then I would eat my little non-meal kind of. So they kind of picked up on those little things, and then that with my doctor being like, "No, she's lost a little weight. Like, kind of don't really know what's going on." Um, there was a time where my doctor basically gave me like 2 weeks and said, "You don't have to gain weight, but you can't lose any weight. And if you're able to do that, then I won't recommend this treatment program. And if you're unable to do that, because right, like eating, I didn't know what was going on. Some people with eating disorders obviously do, and it's on purpose, a little bit more secretive, like hiding food or like doing other like compensatory behaviors to meet those like needs. I had no idea. I thought what I was doing was perfectly fine. So I was like, yeah, sure, like I can do that. So like in my head I was eating more, but obviously wanted to not lose weight. So that's kind of how it came together with everyone noticing. So it was a blessing for me that I was unaware of what I was doing was unhealthy, because it didn't provide an opportunity for the secrecy and like the hiding. So I was like, yeah, I'm fine. What are you talking about? Like it didn't make sense to me. So I was open. So for me, that was really lucky. I know that doesn't happen for everybody, but that was
No,
really
I think that was a blessing.
for sure. Yeah, and to
Yeah,
have
that's
my
not the normal.
yeah,
Yes.
it's not normal for doctors, particularly pediatricians. I feel like to be very educated on eating disorders, or the education is not usually super like up to date, or it kind of comes with those stigmas. So I was very lucky in a lot of different aspects of it that kind of really worked for me in getting the help that I needed a lot quicker than a lot of people do.
Yeah, that is amazing. Okay, so then so I love this part of it, because I will say, listeners, is that myself, after spending 2 months in eating disorder treatment, which I call eating disorder camp, um, many of us, myself included, we all had, and I unfortunately did not go to a great place for this. And I've since, because it is hard to recover from this. So people often have to go to treatment a couple of times. And I did, through several of my friends, I did make some lifelong friends in treatment, which I'm very grateful for. But with working with them, some that then went to other treatment centers that were much better. I think one of the things that ties to, so the mission of RAN and Recovery Advocate Network is twofold. One is what we're doing right now, which is reducing the stigma, educating the world, and also allowing individuals who struggle to realize they're not alone. So that is the whole purpose of this podcast, that I'm so grateful to have you here. The second is is the financial component of it. So when I was in eating disorder camp, I saw several people who were actively working towards their recovery, were not ready to go home. Their insurance, eating disorder and depression and some of those, they're not typically a set program for this period of time, because it's progress based and all of these different factors. And so we would have every 10 days, our insurance would review, and then you would find out the next day whether or not you were going to be able to continue treatment, or if you're immediately going to be shipped home, which feels insane, right? Like if you have cancer or something like that, which eating disorders are incredibly deadly. And so if you have cancer or something, you finish your insurance finishes the treatment until it's time for, and so this is so foreign to so many people. And so a lot of us, the founders, were at this treatment place and drinking coffee, which I was not supposed to be drinking coffee, because I was in the eating disorder program. I was breaking the rules. Everyone has it out there. They all know now that I was breaking the rules, a little rogue. But anyway, and we saw someone who suddenly got kicked out because of the insurance challenges and had to ship home. And it just became this struggle that anything we can do to try and raise grants to support those people and reduce the stigma and educate. And I think one of the things that, from your perspective, I love hearing how a gift I think that maybe you had was you didn't realize this. And so you might have been more receptive of treatment versus other individuals who are very not receptive, often go against their will. And then when they get there, and then if their insurance drops them, then the cycle is almost worse the next stage. And so I'm so happy for you that you had this gift of, one, loving parents that took you to the doctors that noticed these things and this. Okay, so you clearly that in 2 weeks you lost weight and hence you ended up in treatment, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it was longer than 2 weeks, obviously, the whole process. But that was when my doctor was like, okay, clearly there's a problem.
That was the last one. Yeah.
That was like, I think that was her way of really showing my parents that I had no control over what I was doing. That this was something a little bit more serious. And I didn't know what it meant. My parents didn't know what it meant. So, yeah, obviously I had little to no control over it. And you're so right about when it kind of, you get kicked out early, or if you kind of aren't able to make it through the whole program, it gets worse. Because like I said, I didn't know what was going on. So the first day I went to treatment and they put a plate of food in front of me and said, okay, eat this. And I was like, I cannot eat this. That was when I like realized that what the problem was. I was like, okay, I actually don't have any control over this. But then it also made me aware. So then it kind of started this cycle that I think is a little more common of like the secrecy, or like the not, even the little things that don't seem like it would be like it would mean anything, like leaving a couple crumbs on your plate. Like in a normal person's head, that doesn't really mean much, but to me as an anorexic, it was like kind of like a little win of like I didn't eat it all or whatever. Obviously, I had a very disturbed, like the view of food didn't make any sense. Like in my head, if I ate 5 more blueberries, I would gain 10 pounds. Like that serious of like a disconnect from reality. Obviously, my brain wasn't working properly because I was not nourished. But getting kicked out early, insurance, everything, that's huge because it does. Once I was aware of the cycle, it became obviously much worse and harder to get out of. Getting me in the door was a lot easier than probably for most people because I was like, I don't need help. Like, I'm totally fine. I have no idea what you're talking about. But the cycle definitely started for me at some point. And I was lucky to have good insurance for sure. It was still not cheap by any means. I made the mistake of looking at like the online insurance claims I was like my parent, like it was a lot of money that they were having to spend. And thankfully for us, I was born and raised in San Diego. So we were like right next door to one of the best treatment centers, UC San Diego. So, again, there was a lot that lined up in my favor, but still I definitely experienced having friends kicked out early. I made a lot of lifelong friends too. The first time I was in treatment was a little bit of a camp as well. I was 17. A lot of the other people were like 15, 16. We had a lot more fun than we probably should have, but lifelong friends. And then unfortunately I had the same experience of seeing people get kicked out over and over again, having to come back. I think every time, like you said, makes it a little bit harder, kind of just getting a little bit deeper. And hope, I feel like, is a big part of it. And if you kind of just never get to fully live out the potential of that recovery in treatment, it's very hard to get there on your own.
Yes. I find that it's more traumatizing and it just makes me sad. So it's so funny that we called it camp. We called it camp also because the whole treatment center was mostly focused, the rest of the other side was mostly focused on trauma, and they called it trauma camp because there were like cabins and stuff like that. It was the worst camp I've ever been to in my life. So people know. So I actually was in one treatment center, and was not eat, had just like, I couldn't use one addictive habit that I had to not have these nightmares I was having from the kidnapping. So when they took that away, I resorted to one from my childhood, which was I just stopped eating. And when I was a child, my mom would feed my brothers and make me watch. And I learned that if I'm not hungry, she's not hurting me. So I just resurrected that horrible coping mechanism when I was in a treatment center. And I was like, okay, you've taken away this bad coping mechanism. I can control this. But I thought I had complete control over that. And even when I was at that place, I still was like, this is fine. Like when I go home, or I'll just be fine, before I went to eating disorder camp. And the clinical director pulled up the stats on the death and the suicide rate from all of these things. And I was just like, oh, wow. And so I remember the day that they had an escort take me from the one treatment center to the other treatment center. I cried my way there. I got there, and much like you, Kinsey, they put that plate of food in front of me, and I just sat there and cried because it was the first moment I thought I had 100% control over it. I thought, like, look, as soon as I decide I'm ready to eat, I'll eat, no problem, right? And then I get to this place where they tell you, oh, by the way, every time you use the restroom, you can't shut the door. You have to make noises. We have to come in and look in your toilet and make sure that it's just, feces and urine in there. And I'm like horrified by being an adult and having this, right? And so I'm like, I'm going to get out of here as soon as possible. And they put that plate in front of me, and I just sat there and cried.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was exactly me too. That was like immediate tears. I was like, ooh, yeah, like you said, no control. I thought I had it, and it was not there at all.
So can you tell us a little bit about your journey there? Like, what would you say were some of because I also agree, where I was at and my experience was just like awful. And since then I've like read and done a lot of research on the programs that really crush it and really know how to do it well and how important that is. So I want to say to listeners, one thing that I think that is so important in treatment centers for all modalities. So we've talked a lot about how passionate Ryan is about finding treatment centers that offer different types of different types of things, such as music therapy and art therapy in different ways, so that different, or even there's another, like EMDR or meditation and mindfulness, so that the individual, while they're there, learns perhaps at least one or two tools that work for them as a human for when they leave. And not all treatment centers are set up like that. One of the frustrations that I had was that my treatment center was just determined that I was not eating because I didn't like the way I looked. That I literally spent weeks trying to convince them that it had nothing to do with the way that I looked. So their whole program was centered around that thought process, which meant anyone who didn't fit into that challenge, we weren't getting any help during that period of time. So you could also wonder why insurance is like, I'm not going to pay for this if we aren't supporting treatment centers that are good treatment centers. So can you talk, because you went to a couple different places, can you talk about some of the things that you found really helpful? And if there are things that you think would add value that were not as helpful, go ahead and share those as well.
Yeah, so like I said, I went to UC San Diego, and I did go the same place for both my treatments, but the first time I was in the adolescent program, and the second time I was in the adult program. So same place, but definitely very different experiences. And they use family-based therapy, FBT. It's also called like Maudsley, I think. A lot of dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is kind of like the gold standard for eating disorders, which I personally found really helpful and effective. I think, of course, like the DBT stuff, like the thought challenging and like identifying, because there's honestly a lot of distorted thoughts going on, right? Like I said, the 5 blueberries, I'm going to be eating 10 pounds. Like anyone in like a rational mind knows like that is not a valid thought. But obviously, so learning to like challenge those, like all of that stuff was helpful. But I think especially as a teenager, thankfully, again, I was 17, so my parents still had a little more control over me, obviously. But including the families, I think, was huge, because if you would have left it up to me, I would have never sought out treatment or wanted to get better on my own. So if my parents didn't come in, and especially my mom, like kind of hard hitting, like, no, this is what we're doing, and like, you're going to get better. We're not going to let you live like this. I probably wouldn't have, and I probably wouldn't be here today. So I think that aspect of the treatment I did, the family-based aspect, was crucial, because it is important, right? Like, especially if you are younger. So obviously a little different if you're an adult already, but your family can still be involved and like help hold accountability in whatever way, because it's so hard to do on your own. So to me, that was helpful. And I think in the beginning of my treatment and my recovery and my illness in general, I think my parents did a lot more work than I did, because as a parent, it's hard to kind of sit there and be yelled at. I feel like it's two different people, right? Like, I had my eating disorder personality and my Kinsey personality. Although Kenzie was gone for a long time. So the eating disorder, like when it's being challenged, when you put the plate of food in front of you, like, that's why we burst into tears, because it's the eating disorder being like, oh no, like I'm losing in this moment. So any little win, like, there's a lot of negotiating going on. So having your parents there to be the backbone when you can't be, to kind of chip away at the eating disorder, that was like, I don't think I would have ever really recovered without that. Like I said, I don't think I ever would have chose it for myself. So to me, that was the best part of the first part of my therapy, or my first treatment experience. And of course, even still today, 11 years later, I'm still constantly using my DBT, CBT skills. Not so much for eating disorder stuff. But it's helped wonderfully throughout the rest of my life in college and grad school and just like being an adult. So I'm grateful for that as well.
You know, Marsha Linehan, who came up with the DBT, or dialectical behavioral therapy tools, which is that two things can both be right at the same time, is kind of the start of what it was. And the book that she wrote, I believe it's A Life Worth Living, or something like that tells her life story. She came up with it as she learned how to recover from her own struggles with borderline personality disorder. And so in the beginning, it was really tailored towards that. And I will tell you this, after learning DBT skills in 3 different treatment centers and outside of treatment centers, I quite frankly think that they would be great to teach in like elementary school and middle school. Yes, I'm just a better human being by learning those skills. And I think that's just absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And my parents too, like, they still use the skills that they learned, because I think it was like Wednesday nights, it was like family DBT session. And yeah, it's helpful for them too. Like, I always say, I think it should be a class all through elementary and high school. Like you said, I think the world would be a better place. Because no one really teaches you how to like regulate emotions and distress tolerance and all of that. And it's important in all of life, not just if you have an eating disorder or another mental illness. So yeah, I think that's also been beneficial throughout my life. And then the second time I went to treatment, like I said, it was in the adult program. And that, I will say, was the turning point for me. I remember, like, I can tell you the second I feel like I've recovered, because I walked into that program. I had to come home from college. So I did get to go to my first semester, but had to come home for my second semester due to a relapse. So I'm like 18, all my friends are still in school. I'm back at home with my parents in another treatment program. And I remember I walked into the room, and it's a group setting, obviously. So there's a bunch of people sitting on couches. And I remember I saw like a 35-year-old, a 56-year-old, a 65-year-old. There was a lot of people in their like mid to late 20s. And I was like, oh no. Like, to me, that was just like a crystal ball into my future, I was like, it can't be me. It won't be me. This is not what I want at all. And since the first time I went to treatment, like I had the skills I feel like I needed. It was kind of just doing it and really just diving in and letting complete go of my eating disorder, because I relapsed, throughout my entire first round, I held on to a piece of it to kind of like, I didn't want to let it go. I was like, if I can live this, like, I can walk the line of like in between for the rest of my life. I can control it. Yes, exactly. And I was like, I won't eat any more or any less than I have to. I will stay the exact same weight, right? Like, so in a way, like, of course I was technically healthy, but I was extremely like rigid, no flexibility in my routine, and my eating schedule was like eating the same exact things every single day. So not really a great way to live, right? So it caught up to me. It didn't last for very long. Probably less than a year I was able to do that. But so that was the most helpful for me the second time around, to kind of see what my future looked like if I didn't just dive in.
Now, your first opportunity, and one thing I want to tie to, I was trying to remember exactly, I think it's episode 8 where I interviewed Janine. It's the one on therapy burnout. And by the way, Janine was at my treatment center. She was a lifeblood for me at my eating disorder treatment center. She was amazing. She was not the problem. She was so much of the solution in so many different ways. She's just an amazing human being. Anyways, one of the things we talked about, so when you're talking about that family-based therapy, is that we talked about oftentimes a challenge with treatment, regardless of what the disorder or challenge is that you have the individual and they go into treatment. So it's kind of like taking a sick tree and putting them in the nursery and giving them the nutrients, giving them the education, giving them the sunlight, all of these things they need to recover from the disease and thrive. Okay. But oftentimes the forest that tree was in, nothing's happened to that forest while the tree was in here. Right. And so then we wonder why in so many different treatment scenarios, individuals relapse, because we take that now healthy tree that's newly healthy and we put it back into this diseased forest, or a forest with people who don't understand around, don't really know how to support. They haven't had the time to learn the reasons behind. They may still be stuck in this mindset of, oh, well, she's choosing not to eat, or this is a game to her, or some of the things that people often think about for eating disorder individuals. And what I love about that family-based therapy that you mentioned is it really took not just you, the tree, but it really kind of took your forest with you and said, hey, let's all heal together in this environment where we're going to take away the stigma. We're going to try and dig into the root causes, the underlying reasons. We're going to try and educate everyone, the whole forest, and then let that whole forest, go back home. And I think that's absolutely amazing. So I would advocate for more treatment centers figuring out ways to do that, even if it's not for adolescents, but if it's for, family, older. So then my next question to you is, okay, when you were 17, it was your parents and the pediatrician that were like, Kenzie, there's a problem, right? And you didn't know there was a problem. Now, I venture to say when you were in college, you at this point knew there was a problem, but stuck in the same circle that so many of us are. Like, I can control this. I'm just choosing to be. And so orthorexia is when you really focus on even the minute details of the nutrients that are in it, exactly the calories. It's why when you go to eating disorder treatment, maybe I'll stop calling it camp, eating disorder treatment, they take the labels off of everything. They black out. And some of us, and I'm sure Kenzie would be in that category, we're like, oh, you can take the label off. We know that that's 180 calories. We know that it has 8 grams of fat. And because we've memorized it before we went in, like we can look at a plate and say, and I think for me, a turning point in treatment, because I was just not a great patient, was the day I didn't realize how many calories were in those protein shakes they would make us drink. And then when I realized that, I was just like, oh, wait, Like, I really need to figure out how to eat the food because it's not doing me any favors.
Yeah, no, we had the little boost shakes. I remember that. And it
Yeah.
was, I can't remember if they took the label off or not, but either way.
Oh,
Yeah.
they took the label off of everything with that. They poured it in the glass. It was just, so, okay. So, but fast forward, you have that opportunity with the family-based one in the adolescent, and then you go off to college and you relapsed. What was the trigger that brought you back from college and put you back into treatment? Like who identified that it was a problem? What was that struggle? What did it look like?
So I was able to identify it. Obviously, like I talked about, my parents were extremely supportive. So I always knew that they would like be a safe place. And because of how involved they were, I knew I would never get away with not being okay. Like they would not let me be in college away. I was going to school in Arizona from San Diego. So like I knew that they wouldn't let it happen. So that kind of gave me that like assurance, or I guess just the motivation to tell them before it got worse, I guess. So like I said, I was walking a very fine line between well and sick. Like I said, I ate the same thing every day. Wouldn't eat a calorie more or a calorie less than I was supposed to. Still weighed myself often. I was framing it in the sense I was like putting it out there like, well, I want to make sure I don't lose any weight. The little ways that your eating disorder can kind of like manipulate other people into thinking that what you're doing is healthy. Like, I'm going to calorie count so that I know I'm eating enough. Right. But it's really just so that I don't eat a single more calorie than I have to. So yeah, a lot of rigidity. And obviously in college, it's like everyone wants to like go out and like go to the different places to eat around campus and be normal, like 18-year-olds who are on their own for the first time. So that lack of flexibility was challenging for me. And I was fortunately very self-aware, kind of the whole thing as the whole thing was happening, and kind of seeing myself from like walking the line decently to like, okay, this isn't actually working anymore. And like starting to restrict again, starting to lose weight again. So there was one night where I just called, I think I texted my mom or my dad. And this was late because I remember I was at like a party with friends, and I probably had a little liquid courage to, be like, okay, this is not like, I gotta do something about this. So while I had the courage, I texted my mom, like, I don't think I'm doing well. I think I probably need to come home. And I'm pretty sure my mom like woke my dad up in the middle of the night and was just like, you like get in the car, like you need to go get her. And by the next afternoon, my entire dorm room was packed up and my dad was driving me home. So
Wow.
Again, like not very common experience. I can definitely like see all my privilege in my entire story and having the parents that I had, and that knowledge that they would never let me be sick was very crucial for me. So like I said, the family aspect, knowing that they chose my recovery for me before I could do it for myself. And even now I'm 29 and I know for a fact if something happened, like, again, it would be the same. Like they would not let me, they would do whatever they possibly could in their power to like save me from that. So knowing that, having that was probably the best thing for me because I knew I couldn't get away with it. So that's kind of what motivated me to say something. So I'm like, well, you're gonna find out eventually. So might as well not make this worse for myself than it has to be, kind of. So
I can't wait for my upcoming interview with your mom. I'm so excited. Your parents sound amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so then, and these are different dynamics now. You were in college. You were probably in the middle of a semester, right? This wasn't the end, or?
I finished my first semester, and I think it was before. I think I knew like if I don't do this quickly, I'm gonna kind of we're gonna waste money, gonna have to like have a bunch of like dropped classes.
Right.
So I think I did it before like any sort of deadlines
Okay.
was like, looking back, that's probably a motivator too, that I was like, I don't want to kind of screw myself over.
Here's my window.
Or, yeah, so I was like, I got to do it now if I'm going to do it. So kind of like didn't have to pay the housing, didn't have to pay like the tuition for that semester. I think it was that, now that I think about it, it's definitely was another motivator, but still missed a semester of college.
Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
so do you remember when you were 17, do you remember how long you were in eating disorder treatment?
Oof.
Approximately.
Like, yeah, I want to say probably like at least 5 months, 6 months, something like that. I missed pretty much my entire senior year of high school. I did not go to school. Maybe for a couple months of it. And my mom would probably know better. It's funny, like whenever we do like podcasts, we've done a couple podcasts together, and our recollection of some of it is different, obviously, because we had different experiences during the whole thing, but also my brain wasn't working for the majority of that time. So it's like almost not like amnesia, but like some of it, I'm like, I don't remember it like that. And so it's interesting. She probably have more solid details like that. But I think it was around like 6 months, I would say. I was on a little bit of a time crunch because I was hoping to go to college. So yeah.
But 6 months of, having to track, eat, select your meals, which I found the selection also, I don't know how they did it with you guys, but they gave us a menu and we had to go in for the week ahead of time and select things. And I remember being so disgusted that I was like, I feel like the kitchen just doesn't know how to make any healthy food. Like, seriously, there's nothing on this menu I can pick, which is so silly when I look back at it. And it's 6 months of working up the steps of the whole bathroom ritual that we'll talk about. So one of the things that we did at my treatment center, so listeners, if you don't know, because many individuals or everyone goes to treatment for a slightly different reason, and some may have some of the mechanisms where they will, throw up or things like that. So when you go to the bathroom, in the very beginning, when you get there and you have like zero privacy, zero rights, we had cameras on us 24/7 in our cottage, and our bathrooms were locked. So we had to go and ask for permission to use the bathroom. We had to be monitored. The door had to be open. And in the beginning, I remember the hardest part and how so many people got so constipated in the beginning and had to start doing prunes was because the idea that you have to make sounds or talk or do something while you're pooping was like the hardest thing. So I used to sing, I used to hum to myself. And on our bathrooms, they'd had like 2 just black and white sheets of paper that were DBT skills that one of the therapists had just put on the wall just to like help people out. And so finally, midway through my treatment, a couple of us that were there were like, this is not acceptable. So we talked them into letting us do an art day and go online, and we made hysterical bathroom poop signs. Like, we made a sign that was like, you would have a TripAdvisory or a Google review or a Yelp review, and it had 1 star, and we painted it 1 star and said zero privacy. And we did all of these like hysterical signs to put on the walls to help the next new person who came in and had to really realize they were at a treatment center. They had lost so much of their freedom and they needed to figure out how to kind of live life again.
Yeah.
That was hard. So tell me about your second one. So you go, now at this point you have an idea of what you're getting into. So that probably caused even more anxiety before the day you arrived, knowing what the future was going to be like there. Or did you not have anxiety because you knew?
I think like I said, the first time I had probably a little bit too much fun. So I was 18 the second time, so it was like I think I remember the psychiatrist asking me like, would you rather go to the adolescent or the adult? And I was like, adolescent, like for sure. And they were like, okay, you're gonna go to the adult one. because they knew.
Which
So
saved your life.
yes, it for sure did. So I don't think it added to my anxiety. I think after that first day, I was kind of going in like, all right, here we go again, whatever. After that first day though, kind of realizing I think I could have left that first day and been like, we got this. Like I could do this at home. Like we're good. I think that added to my anxiety afterwards because once my like mindset kind of shifted, it is very difficult to be around people who are like a lot sicker than you. And I think that's can be hard in some treatment settings because eating disorders can be very competitive or like who's the sickest or I don't look as sick as this person or I don't have as many symptoms as this person. That sort of thing. So I think it can be an interesting dynamic. So I think I had increased anxiety afterwards when I realized like, oh, I'm kind of stuck here. Like I have to do this again. But going in, it wasn't too bad because again, I kind of knew what to expect, but in the same sense, not really because it was the adult program. But yeah, it was it was everything. I feel like at once, lots of emotions.
So, what would you like for treatment centers if you were going to build your own program or if you were going to just advise treatment centers from your perspective? And I want to clarify, we will say at the end, these are always our own thoughts. We don't represent any organization. But what are some of the key things that you really found valuable? And if there are a couple that you can think of that you didn't find as valuable, go ahead and share those as well. But what advice, feedback, thoughts would you give to a center that's really looking to do the best they can?
I think again, the family-based approach, and it can look differently for everyone, right? Like some people don't have like a nuclear family, some people just have friends, some people have a partner. I think any sort of inclusion of people's family, whether it's chosen family or not, is super beneficial at any age. I think peer support is incredibly important. And that is not really included in most programs. So I think there's a lot of hope that can come from like seeing someone who's been through what you've been through and seeing what your life can look like if you choose recovery and like fully let go of your eating disorder. Because I think there's a lot of people who don't really realize they think that it's, oh, this is just going to be part of me forever. And to an extent it is. I will always have that little voice in the back of my head. I don't think it'll ever go away, but it just has no power over me anymore. So I think having that peer connection is really essential in like I said, in the treatment setting, it can be great, but it can also be a little damaging with the competitive nature. So I guess my caveat would be like the peer needs to be recovered.
Someone who's recovered.
Who is
Yes.
recovered, to kind of give that guidance and like the hope, really. I feel like again, the kind of like the crystal ball into what your future can be. Because I just imagine what my life would be like if I stayed in that like limbo stage, the like half recovery forever, and it just like makes my skin crawl because I hate to think that anyone feels like that's going to be their life forever.
I love that. When I interviewed Jeff Breedlove, we did a 2-part series and we talk a lot about peer networks and how, especially like alcohol addiction or suicide challenges and having peers who are peer advocates. I can't remember the exact term, but they can go into the hospitals there and work alongside, because I think of, in this instance, several of the challenges that we had is that the individuals who were there, that the staff workers, and I mean, we had this one individual who I prefer the idea of having a patient advocate versus, I don't remember what they called them at this treatment center, but this one lady was a former prison guard. And one day we're sitting at the table and she lectures us on how grateful we should be because she sees the food that people get in prison. And I was so furious. I said to her, we're not in prison. Like, we haven't committed a crime. And she goes, well, you could say crime against humanity and against your body. That is not the type of people that create a healthy environment in it. But the peer support, that's an individual who, when you're talking to them, you know that they have been in a similar place. Everyone's experience is different, right? But they've been in a similar place. They understand your struggle. They understand how hard it is and that you're not choosing this way of life. And they have the keys they have figured out. So they give that hope. Like, they are now living a life worth living. And I want to live a life worth living. They've been where I'm at. They're working towards this. I find so much hope and joy in that because there's balance on things too. I remember our nutritionist, she wouldn't allow us to say we didn't like something. So if you didn't like olives or something, she would only allow you to say something wasn't your preference. And I remember it one day, I don't remember what it was. It was probably olives or something. And I was just like, no, I don't like this. And at this stage, this was towards the end of my treatment, right? I was like, I do like peanut butter and apples. I do like ice cream. I do like these things that I resisted having. Okay. I do like these. And there are some things that are not my preference, right? But there are also some things that I don't like. And having an individual who, and I think there was a part of me in my head that was like, you have no idea what you're really talking about because you've studied it in books, but you haven't lived it and experienced it. And that's what that peer support is.
Yes, absolutely. That's funny because olives is like the only food that I don't like. So that's, I would be with you on that one. Yeah, that's funny. Yeah, no, I agree. I think there's something, we had some like recovery speakers come in and talk to us when I was in treatment, but it never really like hit the way I think it was intended to. But I think also when you're just kind of like talking to a big group setting, it's a little different. But when you get that like one-on-one kind of like, I mean, people see it works very well having like sponsors in AA and NA, like that's very effective. And it's that kind of accountability, that hope, all of the things, the understanding, being seen, being heard in a more impactful way. Because of course, like my mom has read everything you could probably read about eating disorders and knows like everything that you could know as someone who's never had one, but she's still never had an eating disorder. So there's that different level of seen and heard that you can't really take it, even with the most well-educated people in the field. So I think it's invaluable, really.
And for listeners, there are also, you can go online and I will put links in the show notes. There are 12-step programs based off of AA for eating disorders. And there is Eating Disorder Anonymous that you can go in and read that book. There are lots of other types of support groups and stuff that you can find for eating disorders. And I just want to echo everything that Kenzie just said on that, how valuable just getting in a network with people where you can feel safe and vulnerable. And I know for me, it's an area where I don't feel as if I have to justify my struggles, but I can just say I'm struggling with this and I don't have to prove that it's bad enough or prove that it's serious enough or, here are the people. I remember one of the jokes we had was people that would come up and say, I don't see what the problem is, just eat. And I would say, oh, that's such a great idea. I didn't even think about it. Thank you so much for telling me that wise word of wisdom. Just like you would go to someone who is struggles with alcohol. I don't see what the problem is. Just don't drink. Or, I don't see what the problem is. Just, I don't know, all the random things that you can do. Like those are not helpful. But the person who says, I see you're struggling, I'm here to listen and be non-judgmental. I think peer support to me has a lot more of that non-judgmental part in it that is such a lifesaver.
Yes, I agree. And being able to kind of see what it looks like on the other side. I think there's just that hope. It feels like this is going to be forever. This is going to be like controlling me forever, whatever the thought may be. Seeing someone who doesn't have that and is like not kind of weighed down by those chains, really, like that's I feel like that's very powerful to know that it's possible, and know that like I'm not the exception, right? Like anyone can get there, not easily. It'll be painful, it'll be hard, but like seeing how worth it is to kind of choose that path and know that it's possible for you as well.
I love it. So, Kinsey, is there anything that you really hoped we would cover that we haven't covered yet?
I don't think so. I feel like just the idea of full recovery, like I was just talking about, that's like my main message. I feel like that I always want to convey, because I did live in that spot for a long time of thinking that it would be my life forever. And having not been in that spot for so long now, that's really like, that's, if I could tell anyone struggling that would be my main message for sure. And then, yeah, I'm really excited for you to talk to my mom because she's the expert. I always say that I think the purpose of me having an eating disorder in this life was for my mom to go down the path that she went down and help all the people that she's helped. So that's, yeah, I guess that would be the one thing I would add.
Love it. Love it. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's a requirement of this podcast that everyone share their favorite motivational quote. So what is your favorite motivational quote, Kinsey?
I think on brand with the topic, I came across this when I think I was in treatment for the first time. And I don't even know if I'm going to quote this right, or who even said it, but when eating an elephant, take one bite at a time. And I feel like that's kind of just true of everything. Life can feel so heavy and big when you're kind of looking at everything that has to happen or everything that's in front of you. But really just like one foot in front of the other, one bite at a time, particularly with eating disorders, literally. So that one kind of helped me a little bit through my journey.
I love it. Well, thank you for joining us on Coffee and Conversation and being so vulnerable. I cannot wait for part 2. And I'm glad the order worked out like this. So we got to talk to you first. And now we'll talk to your mom next and we'll play them both back to back. So thank you so much for being a guest.
Thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today with your Coffee and Conversation. We hope you've been encouraged and learned something from today's story. To learn more about today's guest, please check out our show notes for more details. Now it's time to remember to like this episode, subscribe, and turn on your notifications to ensure you do not miss future episodes. Recovery Advocate Network envisions a world where individuals with mental health challenges receive comprehensive and effective treatment without the worry of financial burdens to themselves or their families, all without the stigmas often present in society. We are proud that every individual working with RAN does so on a 100% volunteer basis. You can support the mission by making a financial donation via PayPal or Venmo, or email donate@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org if you would like to donate items for our next fundraising auction. Please visit our website at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org to learn more. Now, stay in the loop about upcoming events, future episodes, and more by following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter X, TikTok, LinkedIn, and all major podcast platforms. As a reminder, the experiences and advice expressed in this episode are the host and guest's own personal stories and do not represent the opinions of any organization mentioned. RAN is passionate about opening the doors for all voices and experiences, not just those expressed in any particular podcast. If you want to share your experiences or expertise, we encourage you to be a future guest by emailing us at podcast@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org or submit a blog by emailing blog@recoveryadvocatenetwork.org. We also encourage you to comment on the episode so that we can continue to provide content that is most beneficial to the community. How do you do that? Visit our website at www.recoveryadvocatenetwork.org, and in the top right corner, click that comment button and comment. So listeners, what do you need to do? Pause what you're doing, subscribe, follow us. Please give us a like and a 5-star rating, write some meaningful comments, and most importantly, Share these episodes with your friends. You never know whose heart you will touch, so please be a part of a reason someone has new hope today. If this episode was triggering to you, we encourage you to contact your support system, therapist, national and community support groups, the Global Crisis Text Line by texting 741-741, and/or if in the U.S., dialing 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you're in the U.S. and need additional resources such as shelter, support group resources, transportation, food, and/or a safe, confidential path out of physical or emotional domestic abuse, please call 211 or visit www.211info.org for assistance. Now, we know you are very busy, and we are grateful that you said yes to sharing time with us today. If you stuck to our 3 C's of engagement and listened to the full episode, then visit the podcast section of our website and leave the comment about the podcast, and you'll be entered to win an autographed copy of one of the books from one of our book club series, as well as a Coffee and Conversation coffee mug. So thanks again. Until next time, back to your coffee.